راديون تبخن اللي حافظ نايل بيت بفمر اللي ومخدكو قذاوتنا عدي عين.
So hello to all our viewers tuning in from different sectors of the world. Again, my name is Fanantas Mariam, member of the Akal Media. Also joining me as a host today, as a co-host on our show today is Alicia Tesfalem. Alicia is a born and raised American, graduate of the University of Nebraska, and now an activist for the Eritrean people overseas. We hope you all are staying healthy and safe during these difficult times. To our viewers, thank you for your prized time. We hope you will find value in today's interview. Today's topic is about creating change and building trust amongst the younger generation. Trust is established with young people when they see a consistent approach towards deconstructing various forms of oppression on multiple capacities. Youth have been provided temporary band-aid solutions that do not go beyond scratching the surface. Young people are becoming more aware and educated on the issues of dictatorship in Eritrea and are seeking systemic overhaul in government. Before we get started, I also would like to acknowledge the presence of our eminent guest and co-host. On behalf of Akal Media, we would like to express our deepest gratitude for taking the time to come on our show. We are excited and look forward to today's discussion. So our guest for today is a freedom fighter, scholar, central banker, diplomat, and author of the book Eritrea at a Crossroads, and he goes by Ambassador Andebrhan. So Ambassador, thanks again for coming on. We know how busy you are, and we're grateful that you shared some of your time with us. So I will pass it on to you. If you could just take the time to introduce yourself and relate to us a little bit about your background for our diasporas.
Thank you very much, Fanan. Thank you also for the brief but excellent introduction. I don't think I have much to add to that. It will be redundant. So let's just go on with our discussion.
Okay, sure. Okay, so my first question for you, Ambassador, is you were in the big ship of our beloved country that you fought for in the struggle. And at some point we were on the path to liberation, then headed to oppression. And I just want to know, like, what went wrong? Like, where did we go wrong? Like, what happened?
That's a very fundamental question that really applies not just as Eritreans, but virtually to every country that has gone through a national liberation movement with an armed phase. You know, we started, the Eritrean struggle for self-determination started, evolved, and in fact was accomplished with quite revolutionary ideas of freedom, social transformation, economic transformation, essentially the ultimate improvement of the human condition in our specific part of the world, which is Eritrea. A movement that led such a heroic struggle and won an epic victory against overwhelming odds, once in power, post-liberation, atrophied. What does this mean? It means that the revolutionary ideals that inspired the movement, that inspired tens of thousands of young Eritrean men and women to pay or to make the ultimate sacrifice, finally face betrayal. What's the essence of this betrayal? Once in power, the former revolutionary leadership in the first place split. There were divisions inside, and the one that prevailed acquired certain perks in power, privileges, interests, etc. So the revolutionary ideas were sacrificed for new interests that power necessarily lent the people in power, and thus they became the new privileged class and wanted to preserve the new privileges. And I think this explains what happened in Eritrea, the atrophying of a once liberation movement and the transformation of that movement really into a reactionary force seeking to conserve the privileges, interests, and benefits that derive from power. And these are economic, social, political, etc. We can go into greater details if we have the time, but I think in short, it's the atrophying of a once liberation movement, the revolutionary movement, into essentially a reactionary conservator of the privileges that power has afforded the leaders of that movement.
Okay, perfect. So my next question is, with regards to the current state of our country this present day, what do you feel, looking back at 1991, could have been done better, both those who were in government, in the country, and in diaspora? What do you feel could have been done differently?
I think 1991 was a time of great celebration for Eritreans, both at home and in the diaspora. Yeah. In fact, there was a national euphoria that went on and on and on. I think at that time, wise leadership would have required the invitation of all who participated in the armed struggle, but for various reasons, including the civil war, fell off on the way, to a process of national reconciliation. If had we been wise, we should have said, okay, we started this journey. In the process, we've had ups and downs, pitfalls, including internecine killing, the civil war that went on and off for 10 years. Then we could have said, okay, that was unfortunate. But now that we have achieved our common objective of liberating Eritrea, let's now sit together, reconcile, maybe apply what is in modern parlance known as transitional justice, restorative rather than punitive justice, and say, okay, let's create the framework that will enable us to build our country together. Let's heal our wounds and move forward to build a better future for our people and for our country. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes we made in 1991.
Okay. So, Alicia, go ahead.
Okay. Many Eritreans, can you guys hear me okay? Many Eritreans speculate through Isaias's actions that he is trying to destroy Eritreans and the nation because he hates the Eritrean people. For many young Eritrean diaspora, that does not make sense logically because he was a freedom fighter who had sacrificed for the nation. And a lot of people, especially in Hagdef, give him credit in liberating the country. In your book, you had stated, in your book, The Eritrea at a Crossroads, Isaias blurted, "I know that you call me Agame," parentheses, the name of the district in Tigray, misused in popular parlance as a pejorative reference to people of the Tigrayan origin. "Behind my back, I will show you. I will take this country down as I put it up." Do you think that Isaias Afwerki is trying to destroy the Eritrean people and the country? And if so, why?
Look, that anecdote was told to me by a very trusted friend who was present at the time it was said, okay? In all fairness, I'm not sure that Isaias is working to destroy Eritrea intentionally. Maybe he might think in his own psychological mindset that he's doing the right thing. But we're applying the reality, the objective consequences of his policy and actions to judge what he's doing. And that's the destruction of the Eritrea as a country, the destruction of his institutions, of his traditions, of his values, the dismantling of our families, because the family is the basis of society. Without a family, you cannot have a society, a community. Without a community, you cannot have a country. So we are applying criteria or measures that we see happening on the ground. But we're not sure of what his mindset is. Maybe he has a world of his own within which he might be thinking that he's doing the right thing. We don't know. But we're judging him by the objective consequences of his policies and actions that we all see together. So I think this is debatable. But the issue for us is whether he is doing it intentionally or unintentionally. What's important for us is to bring ourselves together in order to bring about change in the country, so that the original objectives of the liberation movement, that is freedom, justice, democracy, prosperity, can be restored to Eritrea, and the Eritrean people can live at peace with themselves and with their neighbors.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is you cannot, that you don't know what his reality may be, but rather we should focus on the actions that he's taken place to create the change that we want to see, because it is quite clear that he is not providing what we wanted in a liberation.
By the way, it is not really correct to say that he brought about liberation. Mm-hmm. He was the leader of the front at two levels, okay? There's no question about that. And as a leader, he had a role. But who brought about liberation is the Eritrean people through their hard work, their sacrifices, and their hard struggle. So I think we need to put this in perspective. Yes, as a leader, he played a role, but it was not a paramount role. The paramount role belonged to the people of Eritrea, the young men and women who gave their lives so that Eritrea can be free.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Do you want me to go, Alicia, or do you want to?
It's all you.
Okay. So, Ambassador, I just wanted to ask, most of us in diaspora, I could say most of us, born and raised here, majority of us are disconnected as to what is going on in the current situation in Eritrea. I know me, myself, it was more like 7 years ago, I really started to dive in and look at the situation. And, you know, when I talk to friends, you know, people, Eritrean people, they kind of like say, you know, don't listen to the UN, the human rights activists, they're not accurate, they lie a lot, so they falsify. So we're disconnected and we want to learn more. Like, and I just want to spread the message. What is the current state of Eritrea as of this day, the current state? Briefly, if you can just jot some messages.
Look, I think, yes, the Eritreans in the diaspora have, of course, some constraints in understanding the real situation on the ground inside the country. So it's very important that they really make a concerted effort to understand and become aware of ourselves as individuals, as young men and women growing up or grown up in the diaspora, and as a people, to know the history of Eritrea as a country and as a people, its evolution, its struggle, its tribulations and trials in the process, etc. I think this is very important. A clear understanding of what's going on the ground is made even much more difficult by the proliferation of all kinds of social media, much of it hostile to the idea of a sovereign independent state of Eritrea. Some of it actually filled with all kinds of expansionist undertonings, and it's natural that young men and women who grew up in the diaspora, who are not really connected, who've not grown up in Eritrea, because when you grow up in Eritrea, you were born into a family, you have neighbors, you're in a community, you go to school, you have teachers, etc. You develop a certain understanding of yourself as an Eritrean and as a member of an Eritrean community. And so you have a deeper understanding of the situation, and then you can sift fact from fiction when you are overwhelmed with all these kinds of information from the social media, some of which is, of course, disseminated from clearly hostile sources. So the important thing is to try to follow, to try to stay connected, and to try also to learn as much as possible, to become aware of what's going on, and to understand that we as Eritreans, we have a history of struggle against alien oppression that has helped us develop a distinct Eritrean national identity that transcends maybe ethnic, provincial, regional, religious affiliation. I think Eritrea in many ways is a unique country in the sense that all Eritreans have an Eritrean national identity that's above everything else, because every person has different identities, okay? You're young, you're a young woman, you're Eritrean, maybe born and raised in Canada, etc. You have different identities. We wear different hats. But the one thing that unites us all is an Eritrean national identity that has developed in a struggle against colonial oppression, that has been consolidated during the armed struggle, as I said, against all kinds of hostile forces, and the victory that we finally achieved. So this is quite really unique in Africa, in the sense that the first thing that comes to our mind, that I'm an Eritrean, and I relate to any other Eritrean, irrespective of his religious, regional, ethnic, linguistic affiliation. So this is really a great asset that we should preserve and build on in the struggle to bring about change and democratic transformation in our country.
Good, okay. Well, there is a video, just for our viewers, that I compiled together of the EPLF and then versus the 4 generations later. I also sent it to you, Ambassador, and you know, what was your thoughts when you were watching that video? Because it was you and EPLF and your values, the values of EPLF, and now we're here in like the 2000s, and you have people like Alicia, Vanessa Tsahaye, and so many other Yaakl, younger born and raised diaspora now saying enough is enough. We're still continuing the fight for justice. Like, what runs through your mind? Because I know you were a freedom fighter, and you put in many years. And when seeing that, like, what's your intake on that when you saw that video?
You know, it reminds me of the 1980s, when we were busy developing an educational policy, curriculum, and pedagogy for the future of Eritrea. An educational policy, curriculum, and pedagogy that we hoped would equip a new generation of Eritreans or future generations of Eritreans with knowledge, technology, and innovation to rebuild Eritrea, and of course, to bring about not only economic, but also social, political, and cultural progress to the country. And it takes me back to those very important years in the annals of the struggle of the armed struggle. And it contrasts quite clearly with what we have today. When I said in my book, betrayal, it's a betrayal of these ideals. We had this vision for our youth of bringing them up in proper family circumstances, normal upbringing, educating them with the best available technology, knowledge, innovation, etc., and equipping them not only to prepare them for life, for themselves and for their families, but also to make maximum contribution to the development and progress of the country. And what we ended up was, or has been, the abnormal situation that the government, especially after the mid-90s, has created for our youth, this indefinite national service, separating them from families from early in life. And once in the national service, it becomes a lifelong commitment, etc. This is not, or these are not the ideas for which we fought. Some of the ideas for which we fought are clearly articulated in the piece, in the video, and the future we had for our youth, an educated youth equipped with modern science and technology, ready to take part in the world economy, which we know now is a knowledge-based economy, an increasingly green economy, etc., etc. So I think the government, one of its serious crimes is the squandering of the most important resource of our people, and that's our youth. Because the most important resource of any country is people, is youth. But they must be equipped with knowledge, technology, innovation, so that they can actualize their potential and help the country also actualize its potential as well.
Yeah. Very good. Alicia, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in advocacy work off and on since 2011. One theme I see that works against us is the trauma and the lack of healthy communication that contributes from reaching the advancements of unity and creating the change that we want to see back home. Do you think for this to be true? And if so, how can we better address these issues so that we can unite as Eritrean people and create the change we want to see back home?
Thank you, Alicia. I think it's true that especially Eritrean diaspora politics is divided, highly polarized, and extremely fragmented. There's lack of trust, lack of confidence in each other, a lot of name calling, a lot of insulting, etc., etc. What needs to be done is, in my view, first of all, make a clear distinction between the regime in Eritrea, or the interests of the regime in Eritrea, and the interests of the people of Eritrea and the state of Eritrea. So in all our work, we should also be principled, consistent, and integral. We must try to defend, protect, promote the national interest of Eritrea and the Eritrean people, and isolate and weaken the regime. Unfortunately, much of the diaspora opposition fails to make that distinction and to order its priorities on the basis of that distinction. So what's necessary is, in my view, to really understand the clear difference between the interests of the people of Eritrea and the state of Eritrea on the one hand, and the interests of the regime. And of course, to weaken the regime and to strengthen, defend, protect the interests of the country. In that, then we should have certain principles. We should have consistency, and we should have integrity. And this can be developed only through, I think, a a common understanding of our history, a common understanding of our present, a common or a shared vision of our future. And once we are able to do that, once we are equipped with the right kind of knowledge, then I think that in itself will begin to bring us together.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to switch up a little bit. So I have a question, Ambassador. How do we bring change? Is there any peaceful means or forcefully? Like, how do we bring change? Is there a peaceful or forceful way?
Look, change must first and foremost happen in ourselves. We must be able to change ourselves, equip ourselves with positive thinking, equip ourselves with thinking that brings us together instead of keeps us apart or enlarge the gap that exists. People argue between whether peaceful change or forceful change. I think this is, in my view, sophistry. Change can happen within Eritrea. How it happens will depend on the agents of change at the time they bring it about. In other words, it's not really useful for Eritrean political movements, political opposition movements in the diaspora to squander their time on discussing whether we should bring about change by peaceful means or by forceful means. I think, in my view, what has happened in all cases where change has come about by force, that change has not been able to make a transition to a democratic form of government. Because force breeds force. And force often is very brutal. And it also tends to generate vengeance. And therefore, change can come about in Eritrea, perhaps with minimum force, but essentially by peaceful means. And you can then move towards a program of transition that at the same time provides accounting for the wrongs and crimes committed and closure for the victims of those wrongs and crimes, so that there can be real reconciliation towards social harmony, which would be very, very conducive to the kind of Eritrea we would like to see in the future.
Okay, great. Alicia, do you want to go or do you want me to go? You can go.
Sure, I'll go. For many years, Eritreans were divided to two sides, that those that support the Eritrean regime and those that do not. The polarizing views created a big division, but in recent years, due to the lack of progress and regression in Eritrea, many Eritreans have joined the side of wanting to see change loudly, right? Do you think there should be a criteria in when folks decide to denounce the Eritrean government and them joining us? Or do you think that we should just have them join with open arms, but not hold them accountable for perhaps the crimes, the terrible things that they may have said, or the oppression that they may have caused to the Eritrean people?
Look, the divisions in Eritrean diaspora political opposition movement is not just between supporters and opponents of the regime. It's also within the opponents of the regime. The opposition has been divided. I'm sure you've followed events during the last maybe 10, 15 years. We've had events like in Hawassa and Andebrhan, which have resulted in more polarized kinds of divisions. I think, to answer your question, whoever comes to join the struggle or the resistance for democratic change in Eritrea should be welcomed with open arms. If there are issues, these issues can be addressed post-independence. Otherwise, people tend to become the accusers, the judges, and the executioners themselves. People are not really well versed with the concept of due process, with the notion that a person is innocent until proven guilty. So whenever people come, they are accused of all kinds of things that they really never committed. And that tends to weaken the opposition. So I think whoever wants to come and join the opposition should be welcomed with open arms, because that weakens the support base of the regime and strengthens the ranks of the opposition, okay? But the opposition must also, as I said earlier, make a very clear distinction between the national interest of Eritrea and the Eritrean people and the interest of the regime. And also, in my view, not follow the notion that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, irrespective of whether that enemy of the enemy is also an enemy of the national interest of Eritrea and the Eritrean people. So I think these are very important issues to bear in mind when approaching the question of national unity in the diaspora political opposition.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is, yes, we should allow for everyone to come in open arms, because the real enemy is there and is using that as leverage to divide us, right? But knowing the population that we are a people, we have cultures, we have a history. That you cannot change, anyone, right? And so dealing with the psychology of Eritreans and how we function, do you think we should get strategic in perhaps addressing these issues? Because no matter what, an Eritrean, we can be quite stubborn at times. We can't let things go. So therefore, should we get unique in addressing the issues? Like, hey, maybe creating a framework where, we accept that person, but that person perhaps admits to the faults that they may have created. And then we have some type of reconciliation process, just like Rwanda did, right, when mass genocide happened, so that they can basically be part of the community, and so that we can focus on the big terrorist at hand, which is Isaias Afwerki and the brutal regime.
At this stage of the struggle, the opposition has neither the capacity nor the means to undertake what we call transitional justice. Okay? I think that should wait for after change. Immediately during the transition, one of the processes should be a process of transitional justice to address the issues that you just mentioned. But this is not the time now. Now is not the time. I think we should understand that very clearly. As long as people are ready, willing, and able to contribute to the struggle for change and post-change, the struggle for democratic transformation, they should be embraced with open arms. Mm-hmm. And any criticism, if there are accusations, if some people have committed crimes, as some people allege, this should be postponed for when after the change comes.
The Zero School was established in September 1976. At that time, it had some 92 students and about 15 teachers who had neither the teaching experience nor the teaching materials nothing of the sort in terms of curriculum or texts, etc. It started from scratch. Over the years, it has served in a very real sense as a laboratory for testing the EPLF ideas on education and developing these ideas into what has today become a national educational program that's being implemented throughout liberated and semi-liberated Eritrea, as well as in the Sudan for Eritrean refugees. Not only teachers, but also like father and mother and brothers and sisters for most of the school children. And it is through these very close cooperative relationship among the children themselves and among the children and the teachers and staff members that we try to overcome the stresses that are incumbent in the ongoing war situation in Eritrea.
Vi under trærne hos 7A. De første årene får elevene undervisning på morsmålet. De vanligste språkene tigrinya eller tigré, men når elevene kommer i de øverste klassene, foregår all undervisning på engelsk. Det gjelder fag som matematikk, fysikk, kjemi og samfunnsfag. Elevene stolte av skolen sin, selv om bare noen få klasser har tavler og andre hjelpemidler som kart og plansjer. De har heller ikke nok pulter og lærebøker. Lærebøkene trykkes i EPLFs trykkeri, som dessuten skal forsyne alle de voksne som nå for første gang får en anledning til å lære å lese og skrive.
We have also this constant air raids, which remind the children that the war is still going on, that make their life very insecure. But there is also the children have learned through experience, through hardship, to adapt to this war situation. In other words, what is an abnormal situation is for them, has for them become normal, which means they know nothing else. And it's under these conditions that they are trying to learn. They go to school and they learn very early in life to be responsible for themselves, for their classmates, even for their teachers.
I håndarbeidstimene får elevene undervisning i tradisjonelt kunsthåndverk som
The underlying principle is that our educational system, in concrete terms, our curriculum, our national educational program, must first and foremost serve the needs of our people, the overwhelming majority of our people, whose educational needs, as well as other needs, have been neglected for centuries by successive colonizers. We are trying to create a new generation of Eritreans who are physically healthy and fit, emotionally balanced, and intellectually well-equipped for the task of economic and social reconstruction that awaits them ahead.
دليون تبخن اللي حافظ نايل بيت بفمر اللي ومخدكو كذاوتنا عدي عين دليون تبخن اللي حافظ نايل بيت بفمر اللي ومخدكو كذاوتنا عدي عد كلنا ናይ ቀደም ኣስመራ ከኣነ ዝፈልጣ ናይ ቀደም ኣስመራ ተስማዛ ዓበኹ ብፅባ መዓራ ከመይ ኮን ይህሉ ጽባያት ኣየራ ወይ በሪት ኣስመራ ብነበረ ህንፃታት ባይቶ እንዳቦና ብነበረ ህንፃታት ባይቶ እንዳቦና ኣኽራናት ጐላጉል ሩባታት ዓድና ባዓልመን ኣለኹም ካብ ኣሕዋት ፍግራና ካብ ኣዕሉኻት ማድና ደቂ ዓድና ካብ ርሑቕ ማዕዶ ንጠርነፍሎ ገዛውትና ማዓፊና ደቂ ዓድና ካብ ርሑቕ ማዕዶ ንተኣከብሎ ገዛውትና ሓቢርና ንኸዶ ديون تذخن اللي حافظنا لبيت بثمر اللي ومخدكو قذاوتنا عدي عين ديون تذخن اللي حافظنا لبيت بثمر اللي ومخدكو قذاوتنا عدي عين بيتي بيتي من إفي مرعو دا بيتي بيتي من إفي مرعو انت وحبرة سب مقدت فريقو اللو دي يجينا نسون تبريقو نسون تبريقو بيت كريستيان أذاني مفاقيد دول بيت كريستيان أذانت مفاقيد اللودي ويلين بشكت تناقيد من كفي غف عدي ندهاب الأبد ندهاب الأبد عدنا كاب رحق معدو نتأكد له قذاوتنا معفنا لك عدنا كاب رحق معدو ونترف له قذاوتنا حبيرنا دليون تذخن اللي حافظنا البيت بثمر اللي ومخدكو قذاوتنا دليون تذخن اللي حافظنا البيت بثمر اللي ومخدكو قذاوتنا أتكلت جنداع وين لكم حاري فرتات ميلا برديد أبيض مكري عكات في مفنقابة بركاد بخوري بركاد بخوري مدبر بابورات ما يطيح بحري فلفلتي معدنات ما يطيح بحري مقرجو بحرنا نفذ في مدري مصواع مفتعثر رايدي خبري إريراو بروحك معلوك نتأكد مندوك قذاوتنا حبيبنا لك عدنا كبروحك معلوك ونتقرنا فندوك قذاوتنا حبيبنا قذاوتنا حبيبنا